here to introduce themselves as they first speak. But I would like to welcome them to the meeting and anyone who might be joining us via YouTube, either live or in a later streaming. We've got a busy agenda as always, and we will be hearing from a patient, but that's going to be a little bit later in the agenda. So if you notice a slight change to the order, that's what it's about. We will get to it when we get to it. So in terms of declarations of interest, I've not received any specific declarations for this morning's agenda. Obviously our normal declarations are on the website as normal. Apologies for absence. I've received them from Karen McConnell, our Deputy Chair, and from Ivana Chalmers, the Chief Executive of Health Watch Hertfordshire. Let's move on. Oh, and sorry, and also Zoe Aslan for one of our non-executives. Apologies. Moving then to the minutes of the previous meeting, they are in the papers, and I wondered if we could just check if everyone is happy with that they are a true record. We have been notified in advance of one minor correction from David Buckle, which we will update subsequently. But does anybody else have anything that they would like to change in the minutes, please? No, I'll take that as confirmation that subject to that one change, we're happy with those. Let's move then on to the action log. Stuart, I don't know if you wanted to say something about it.
Thank you. So I'm Stuart Lawson and I'm the Head of Corporate Governance. And so all the actions are down as green. Now some of the actions are ongoing actions, so it's not suggesting that they're complete in that sense, but they can come off the action log. The one correction is on page 13, where we said we'd bring the terms of reference for the digital committee. The digital committee in December asked that they come back to January's meeting, so it was on the agenda, but they're not ready yet.
Thank you, yes, I was aware of that. Does anyone have any questions or comments relating to the action log? No, thank you very much. Then let's move on. First of all, questions from the public. Am I right, Stuart, that we've not received any this month?
That's correct, no questions.
Thank you very much. So let me then go on to my report, which is a verbal one, as usual. I've really only got one thing, sort of a major piece of news just to share with the public. Our staff and patients are probably aware that last week it was announced that there was going to be an imminent public consultation on the proposed relocation of the cancer services offered by the Mount Vernon Cancer Centre. It was announced last week, and the consultation starts next week and will run until the end of March. The proposal that is on the table is to build a new state-of-the-art cancer centre on the site of Watford General Hospital, with the service managed by University College London Hospitals. There is also, as part of the discussion, an option about a secondary radiotherapy unit, which might be sited either at the Luton and Dunstable Hospital or possibly supplementing our existing cancer services at Lister. As far as this trust goes, we're really clear that our focus remains our patients, our staff, the continuity and quality of care during this what may be quite a complex transition period. We absolutely encourage our patients and staff to contribute, to ask questions, to express their views in one of the many routes that are available to ensure that the right decisions are made by NHS England. I think that's the only thing that I particularly want to draw attention to. If anyone has any questions, anything I've said, that would be happy to take. No? Lovely. All right.
Just a comment really, because the certainty of the future of Mount Vernon has been an issue for us, the staff, everybody for a long time. So it's just good to see that some clear way forward has been suggested.
Totally agree, David. Sorry, that's David Buckle, one of our non-executive directors. But no, as he says, there has been a lot of uncertainty for many years, so it is good to see this. But it is important that we hear the views of our patients and staff about what the right thing to do is. I'm going to leave it there. If there are no other questions or comments, and I'll hand over to Adam for his report.
Thank you very much. Adam Smith-Jones, the Chief Executive of the Trust. My report, board members have in front of them, so I won't. Here on a permanent basis, they're training consistent rotation through various trusts, and they are employed at a regional level. But the government have challenged all trusts to see how we fare in terms of the experience we offer. There was a baseline assessment done a couple of months ago. A number of our areas were still in training in terms of improvements we were making, but we were asked just before Christmas to submit an updated assessment. And I'm really pleased to observe that we are now scoring 87% of the requested actions, which will put us in a very strong position as a comparator. We've lots of engagement with our Resident Doctors Forum, which is something we've had in place for a while, who, whilst there is always areas we can look to improve, are very supportive and have confirmed they're very content with that assessment. So I've attached in the paper for people to see the detailed assessment we've put in place. I have mentioned at previous meetings that we were shortlisted in the Health Service Journal Awards this year for the Trust of the Year. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in winning the award, but I want to offer our congratulations to West Hertfordshire, who actually picked up the award this year. But I think it's really great for the population of Hertfordshire to have their two acute trusts both shortlisted in that category. And then we'll decide whether next year we put in an application again for Trust of the Year. But yeah, it's been a very positive experience for those involved. It was really good for the charity to fund a couple of members of staff to attend that awards evening, and I know they had a really positive time at that event. Again, the rankings that are now going to be a quarterly feature have come out, which cements us as the highest performing acute trust in the region still, and we were 19th nationally, we've moved to 21st nationally, so again, really in the upper echelons of the comparative performance across the country. We will continue to focus on that, but I think, bearing in mind it's both an objective and a comprehensive assessment, I think it's really positive external validation of where we are as an organisation. We are now a busy part of the year in terms of submitting plans. We had to submit our first draft plan for 26-27 a little bit before Christmas, and Martin, our CFO, and team, particularly alongside our ops colleagues, worked really hard to get that first draft submission in. Board members will be aware that we also had to do a self-assessment declaration of our confidence in the assurance of that plan, on the basis that there were a number of areas. We only heard 2 days before, I think we met as a group, what the ICB were intending to commission. So it was impossible to triangulate, and a number of these areas required more in-depth work. We submitted our assessment, and I've included that as an appendix again for this paper to see where we are and the areas we believe we will firm up before the final submission in February. And then the final thing I wanted to touch on is that as part of our kind of end of the calendar year, we asked our divisions and directorates to submit some of the areas that they were particularly proud of. We're often focusing on the areas we need to improve, but sometimes we don't take the moment to just reflect on all that's been achieved. So I asked all those areas to submit areas that they wanted to share in the board. So we've not got a comprehensive list there, but those that submitted areas to me are included as an appendix, just to give a flavour of the things that are happening that we may not always observe at the board table because they never rise to that level of kind of priority. But I think occasionally we need to just be proud of what the people we're privileged to lead are doing on a day-to-day basis, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Adam, please? I did actually have one myself, and I don't know if you or Penny might be able to answer. In terms of the Improving Doctors' Working Lives programme, I did notice in the detailed appendix there were a couple of areas where it looked like our ranking had gone down rather than had increased. And I just wondered, was that because it was a misassessment on the baseline, or had actually things deteriorated? I don't know whether Penny, one was about rest facilities and the other was about mandatory training and learning.
I don't think it's gone down. I think as we've moved through this programme, there's a greater level of understanding. And I think, overall, going from 62 to 87, we were quite pleased, even though we kind of thought that we might have been a bit hard on ourselves in the beginning. So I think, particularly as well from the resident doctors themselves, so I don't think we've gone down. I think we've just had greater clarity on what's being measured, and therefore we're being slightly more stringent in that application.
I assumed it was that, but I wanted to check. Thank you very much. Lovely. And I think, by the way, I thought it was lovely that we did get those highlights from the different areas in your report. Thank you very much for that. Moving on then, as I say, we will come to the patient story when the patient arrives, so we're carrying with it as we are. So I'm going to turn to the Estates and Facilities Strategy update and ask Kevin Howe, our Director of Estates and Facilities, to give us a quick run through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin Howe, Director of Estates and Facilities. Yeah, we've run through a paper just summarising some of the updates that have been undertaken for the estate strategy, which is what previously gone through the board. The estate strategy is a live and emerging document which is subject to influences both internally and externally. So from the quality strategy which is emerging from the trust all the way through to transformation documentation set out by the NHS. I've tried to identify here where we are picking up on the 10-year plan and the left shift. I can't take the honours of this. This was written by Mark Wilson, who's a fellow director of the state. I think it encompasses everything that we're looking for in here, and it shows how the left shift can be put in. Our principles remain the same within the Estates and Facilities Strategy, which is that it's clinical space for clinical need. And what we tried to do here, and in addition to the items picked up by the Chief Executive in his appendices, we tried to identify here where some examples of works have been undertaken to give us sort of a spectrum. It's not just the boilers, it's not just the cleaning, there's a lot of other work that goes on in the background. So I'd like to have picked out some items there, clearly identified a fundamental part or a supporting part of patient care through the whole system. I'm hoping it's fairly self-explanatory, and I'm more than happy to take questions rather than run through it.
That would be great, thank you. Any questions or comments for Kevin? Teresa.
Thank you so much for your Chief Ross. Kevin, I just wanted to ask you, I think it's implicit perhaps in the strategy but not written, your ambition for dementia-friendly ward environments and outpatient environments.
I think the issue is that now, when all new designs come along, there is a dementia-friendly issue put into that. But that's unfortunately as new designs come on. What we're trying to do as a part of the ongoing routine maintenance and changes and PPM that we do, we encompass the works that are needed. So brighter colours, identifying all issues, all the way down to larger clocks. The whole idea is to ensure that those people coming in with dementia can actually identify exactly where they are in a simplistic manner. So we're trying to embellish that every single time we get a chance. The problem is, of course, there are restrictions and financial restrictions that we can't go from front of house all the way back. So we're identifying those areas where dementia is treated predominantly as our main areas, so that at least we have an identification there, and we will work back from that. Things like the front entrance, as we're doing the front entrance scheme, which is due to first phase will finish in September, that will pick up on clearly identifiable design criteria set down by dementia care, as well as a number of other interested parties who will be parts of the overall design.
Thanks, Kevin. In terms of the emphasis on clinical space for clinical need, but do you think as part of your work as well, there's significant opportunities to kind of release financial kind of efficiency through the consolidation of kind of space in a more rational way?
Absolutely. We shouldn't have to rely upon external support. I believe, with the correct management in place, how we can manage our workforce, which we're working on at the moment, and agile working, etc., that we can consolidate down using hot desking systems for our admin staff, which would allow us to reduce down and therefore maybe close down some of the dependencies on external units where we just have a rental cost. So that's just one of them. If we can consolidate down elsewhere as well, everything all the way from energy costs to other consumable issues can be reduced as well.
Any further?
Just wanted to ask a question really around kind of the inclusivity element. So I know, for example, in the front office front entrance scheme, you included the head in that process to get an understanding of how inclusion is embedded in that. What would you say would be the increases? Because now that we're talking about more around prevention and about more about community engagement, obviously you've got different types of communities, but how are you incorporating some of that learning to be able to feed into the strategy?
I think a lot of this is looking back over projects and finding out where the problems were. You know better from the problems that existed and how you resolved them at a time so you don't have the same problem. There's always the other side of it is when you're designing these things, we're often curtailed by a financial single year expenditure profile, which means that jobs have to be finished in that time. And that's not an excuse, but it does restrict your timescale in consultation and review. We've got a number of specialised areas that deal with the specialist issues, you know, the health and safety, water safety. All of those do their bit, but it's a generic and overview. When it has a substantial effect on diversity and equality, we try to include where we actually can. There are groups. I sit on the UNHCR group all the time, so I get feedback from that and I try to portray that through. Our teams are aware of any issues that have been brought up and I try to ensure that they get as much training as possible in that so that they can recognise it before it becomes a problem. But you're absolutely right, in some cases the turnaround of these projects do not include for all personnel to be involved in it, and sometimes the smaller projects have the much larger impact on you. The front entrance is probably an easier one to do because of what it's actually achieving, whereas the small project for the changing of the toilets could have huge impact. So we need to balance it, but sometimes it is restricted. I agree with you.
Thank you. Actually,
Thank you. It was just to come back on that point as well, Diana, the patient panel that we're setting up, that's going to be a really good opportunity. And we do have specific members and people who have said they're really interested in sharing their views and getting involved in that kind of stuff and these kind of improvements. Thank you.
Richard.
Yes, my name is Richard Oostrom, I'm a non-executive. Kevin, the Energy Centre for Leicester Hospital, we've had several issues over the past couple of years, cost some money. I know you're working on a solution. Can you give us the status, please?
Yeah, I can. We had a status update yesterday. We are looking to enter into a contract for a new CHP and a new contract for the running of the boiler house. I can't go into the details of that, but we believe, a procurement methodology which will take us through, which has been agreed by all. The issue now is whether or not, or how that works out on a financial basis. The CHP is at its end of life, and the risk to this trust is substantial, as this board realises some of our biggest problems in the estates facilities budget over the year was because of the loss of CHP. It equates to around about £8,000 a day when it's not working. That's the impact on the trust. So it's a huge impact. So we have to weigh up the fact that we have this risk, and we've done as much work as we can to the old CHP. But there's always that risk going to go. Over the last, I shouldn't do this as a estates director, I touch wood. Over the last 2 to 3 months, we haven't had a problem with it. That's not to say it won't happen again. The bigger problem is the decarbonisation plan for the government means that come 2020, 2032, 2033, we shouldn't be reliant upon CHPs. CHPs are no longer the sliced bread of this. It should be decarbonisation, ground pump, heat sources, etc. We are looking at the long term on how the trust will move into that phase. But it means that we're going to write off quite an expensive piece of equipment over a short period of time, 5 to 6 years. So we have that in place. We need to balance it. The business case needs to come forward. That will go to the FPPC for approval at that stage. It's looking promising at the moment, but I need to get all the details in, the costs and the dates on it. And one of our biggest issues, of course, when we actually do that changeover for a period of time, we will be without that CHP at £8,000. £8,000 a day. That's when we're generating electricity for ourselves rather than taking it off the grid. So,
do you know when you finalise your proposal?
I have a meeting with our incumbent and the procurement team next week to finalise whether or not an offer can be made. But the implementation of it should be within about 6 months. Now, that's based upon the fact that the buying of a new CHP is the longevity of this project. It's just a very large motor, but there is one available at this moment, and we're negotiating that at the moment. So it's just trying to get that. The risk is the failure in that time when we're leading up to it. I realise that risk, and we're maintaining it as much as we can, but it's as I say, it's just keeping an old lady running.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin.
I'm Kevin Hart, I'm Chief Guidance Officer. I just wanted to probably just reflect sort of 2 further observations in the last sort of 12, sort of 18 months or so. I think we're seeing a lot more integration between different sort of teams involved with estates and facilities work, and I'm just there sort of reflecting on, as host at E&H Place, we're organising a large improvement event towards the end of the month that's looking at what is going to be the blueprint clinical model for neighbourhood health, and estates and facilities teams are very much involved at the outset of that. So as we're looking at what that design needs to be, at the same time we'll be looking at what are the different estates options that we have around place and how might we use the assets that we have in a different way. And I also reflect that there's much more alignment between teams, and there's been some good opportunities that we've probably previously reported at board around how we use E&H PSR improvement method, and a particular element of that, the 3P process planning production events, where we are working alongside the states and facilities, clinical and operational teams to bring a completely different approach to how we redesign our services and our space so it's a better fit for patients and staff. So I think that's just further sort of additions to add into complementing this state strategy.
Right, thank you.
Can I just add one other thing? I agree with it totality. One of the other things is that we're going to try now and support our local colleagues as well. We've got a plethora of education work that we've done both contractually and on the technical side, which I think could support our colleagues out there who are going through the same problems. So we will be looking at that, and I'll reach out to my peers on the other trust to ensure that we do that.
Great. All very positive and sound like we're moving in the right direction. Thank you for your update, Kevin. Any further questions on the estates and facilities strategy? I don't see any more hands. So thank you for that. That was helpful. Let's move then to the next paper, which is about summary learning from desks. Now this is an assurance paper which has been given a reasonable assurance rating. So we'll at the end of our discussion we'll review whether we're comfortable with that. So I'll hand over to Justin.
Thank you very much. My name is Justin Daniels. I'm the Medical Director of the Trust. And I want to thank Sarah for putting together this paper. Again, it's a really good paper that she's written. There are 3 main points that I want to make. The first is that mortality rates for the Trust remain stable, and they are lower than would be expected for a similar sized, similarly organised organisation. One of my concerns over the last month or so has been that we've had a slightly higher than expected extended perinatal mortality. What do I mean by extended perinatal mortality? I'm talking about the combination of both stillbirths at any point during the pregnancy and deaths within the first 28 days of life. We've done an in-depth review to look at this, and there isn't a clear pattern or trend to it. Many of the deaths are related to extreme prematurity, and we don't think that there is a significant problem either with our obstetric and neonatal services but it's something that we're watching and we'll continue to watch extremely carefully in order to make sure that the service we're offering is safe. The final bit that I just wanted to draw the board's attention to is there's a comment in there about delays in TAVI CT reporting. This is a particular type of CT scan done for a particular procedure that we may subsequently want to do in certain patients. It's important that we fix this problem because where these delays are happening, there is the potential for delaying further surgery down the line. So again, it's something that we're working really hard on. I'll stop at that point and I'm really happy to take questions.
No question, just a quick comment. This has, as we would normally do, as the paper says, routinely been discussed at the Quality and Safety Committee. And from a personal perspective, if I only had one report that investigated and analysed patient safety, it would be this one. And it is really reassuring and assuring to see that our mortality is better than average and has been for really a long time. So in reflection, the committee actually did feel, many members of the committee felt that it should have substantial assurance.
Thank you. Any further? Nina?
I'm Nina Chandra, I'm one of the non-executive directors. I also wanted to say that I've been really impressed actually by the response from Nicky and the wider maternity team in terms of understanding that there may be something around deaths and to investigate in more detail, and they mobilised very quickly. So I just wanted to say that I was really impressed by that. And also in my time, I think these mortality reports have changed so much, and they are so much clearer. So, I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team as well, just in working on that and bringing us assurance within those reports.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? So the suggestion has been made from QSC that in fact we're being a bit hard on ourselves, giving it a reasonable assurance, and that actually substantial might be a better, a more appropriate rating. Can I ask for views from board members? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I would echo, it was the view of the, if my recollection is correct, it was the view of the Quality and Safety Committee that it was substantial. And I think it would be helpful for any paper actually which, like this, as an example, which has gone in its entirety to a committee, to have that as a clear starting point in the assurance rationale. I think that would be helpful for those colleagues not at those committees and at that discussion.
Yeah.
So QSC were very much of the view it should be substantial assurance. It does seem like a very thorough, very comprehensive report, as always, excellently put together. As a board, are we comfortable with raising the assurance level to substantial in line with that recommendation? I'll take the nods as agreement. Thank you. We will raise that to substantial. Thank you very much. And thank you for the paper. Again, as usual, very comprehensive. Moving swiftly on to the next thing, maternity incentive scheme. I think Amanda is with us to just summarise that one for us. Thank you.
That's earlier than I anticipated. My name's Amanda. I'm Amanda Rayleigh. I'm Director of Midwifery and Lead Divisional Director of Women's and Children's. So I'm here today to present the assurance report around full compliance with Year 7 of the maternity incentive scheme. Obviously, because in the title 7th year of the scheme, and a lot of the standards now for us are very much in our business as usual in terms of implementation and our governance. I'm very proud of the whole team in terms of the commitment to achieving these standards. The programme this year has been led by Josie Reynolds, my head of governance, with close oversight of myself and the rest of the Cordon leadership team. Clear accountability against each standard, and within the report I've included just a short summary of the process and compliance against each of the standards. included in the pack in Appendix 1, there is a PowerPoint presentation, and rather than including all of the evidence against each standard, it includes examples from each standard. We have a very robust evidence log with all evidence should it be called on. We've had good divisional oversight and good robust discussion at Quality and Safety Committee with all evidence, required evidence submitted through Quality and Safety Committee. So we are claiming compliance with all 10 safety standards for this year, and the board are supportive of the evidence that has been submitted. We will then ask Adam as our CEO to sign the board declaration form, and all evidence will then be reviewed by the SRO at the ICB, who will also sign before we submit to the deadline, which is in the first week of March. It's an ongoing process for us, so we are already starting work towards next year, and we don't quite know yet what next year's standards will look like, whether it will be the same 10 or whether it will look slightly different. And also there are changes, as we know there will not be an LMNS, or certainly not in its current form, changes to the function of our ICB, so we will wait to see what that looks like in terms of the structure for maternity incentive scheme next year. We also are aware that there are several national reports coming, including the report from Baroness Amos. There's been a maternity care bundle just released in the last couple of weeks, and also a postnatal care bundle that may feature in future iterations of the maternity incentive scheme. So we will take the governance processes that we have used robustly over the last years and continue the work as we have done with clear accountability and escalation for support when needed. The recommendations are at the end of the report as to what we're asking from the board today.
Thank you, Amanda. I should have said at the beginning, but this paper has been through the QSE, currently is carrying an assurance level of substantial. So again, we just need to validate if we're comfortable with that level or our views on it. But let me open it up for any questions or comments. Teresa.
Can I just say to you, I mean, a first class report, Amanda, the depth and the work that's gone into this is just remarkable. We have one slight area I know of concern, which is Safety Action 4, and that relates to compensatory rest. I just wanted to ask what your views are around how you're addressing that tiny blip against full compliance standards.
So the requirement within the standard is that we make progress within our action plan, as we have done. So we have worked over the last sort of 2 to 3 years really with our consultant workforce, all our medical workforce, around how we're ensuring adequate rest periods for all of our medical workforce. We have reduced the number of on-calls for our consultants, and we continue to make progress on that action plan. Douglas, as our lead medical director for the division, has worked very closely with the care group lead and the CD, good engagement with all of our obstetric workforce and taking their feedback on board.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for Amanda? No? Oh, sorry. Teacher Farmer.
Thank you, Chair. Madam, just looking at the actions that we're currently taking, trying to understand of the actions that we currently have, which one would you say is like the least robust, and do we have any contingency in that? Just trying to, get that information.
Yes. So for this year, I would say the two standards that we have found the most challenging have been Safety Action 2, which is around data quality, and Safety Action 8, which is around training compliance. So we went live with our digital EPR 18 months ago now, and we have made significant progress, but we still have concerns around the quality of our data in some areas. And we're working closely with our digital team and K2, who are digital providers, to strengthen that and looking at how we can make that more robust. We have achieved compliance this year, but it needs to continued oversight and focused work to continue with that. And the training standards, we need to achieve 90% compliance across all staff groups. Our biggest challenge there is that we have a changeover of doctors in August, So we have a new set of doctors that join the organisation, and it's gathering the evidence that they bring compliance with them from their previous organisation, or that we can get the training through in time. And again, we've had very good oversight of the training compliance, but it was a little bit, there was a lot of people on training in November, and that's something that we're already looking at to plan for that to be a lot more even next year.
Yeah. So I don't want to just keep saying nice things, but I have to say, obviously, over the last year I've seen the team work incredibly hard, and Josie is really, she's had so many amazing meetings, you know, she's checking in with everybody across the board. So I've been really impressed by the way that the team has worked continuously over the 12 months, obviously, and they've been led really well by themselves. The thing I would say around K2 is I do hope that next year we can just really consolidate some of the learnings, because I think we have to get to a stage where we can't just keep saying, well, it's not a mandated field. We've got to find a way to really learn from what we can do and what we actually need, and how we can start to create a template that's going to work. Because I think we have got 12 months worth of knowledge now, so I'm hoping that we'll start to see some of that trickle through. And I know that you're working with the digital team. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how that kind of matures, because I think at this point we do know where the data quality issues are now, and we have to try and find a workaround now.
Yeah, and I think we are coming at that from several different angles. So there's something around continuing the training program from our staff to really support them to do the right thing. There's something about how we are checking that data quality all the time and making corrections as needed. And there's how we work with K2 as our digital providers in terms of making it as easy as we can for our staff to do the right thing. And we're working on all of those things concurrently.
Yeah, and I think we are going to just move more and more towards digital, so it's not something that we're going to escape from. Yeah. And it'd be great if we could see maternity being the kind of leaders in terms of implementing that digital change across the organisation. As you know, we start to roll out different EPRs, etc. So I'm looking forward to seeing that kind of starting through.
Thank you. David?
Well, incentive schemes are there for a reason, and it's really, really great that we've achieved the full thing. So congratulations. From a personal point of view, I know my last trust really struggled to do this, so I know how much hard work and time and effort goes into it. And for many reasons, we get it substantial.
Thank you, David. Right, so we have two things. First of all, to confirm that assurance level is substantial. Can I have confirmation nods? Right, we confirm that level. The other, of course, is, which leads on from that, is are we comfortable with Adam signing the declaration? We are. Nods again for that. Thank you very much, and thank you, Amanda, for the paper. Moving on then to patient experience.
Teresa. Thank you, Chair. Teresa Murphy, Chief Nurse. First of all, I'd like to say an enormous thank you to our volunteers and carers who have actually really transformed how we've worked across the last 12 months. Without their support, which is very invaluable, we would not be able to achieve significant patient-facing comfort activities, so thank you to each and every one of those. Getting into the body of the report, just a couple of key points that I'd like to draw out. If we look at some of the initiatives that we've developed this year, they have been fairly effective. However, when we look at the rising tide of complaints, 18% up in 12 months, that's fairly significant, with the categorisation of complaints largely in the areas as cited in the paper: medical care, communication, delayed appointment, treatment, nursing care and attitude. Some of those areas we're doing some really deep dives into each of the divisions, and that's coming through in the performance meetings via our accountability framework as well. So I want the board to be aware that we're not being complacent in any of these areas. We have also seen an increase in PALS across the past 12 months, and I'll touch on some of the innovation that we're aiming to put in place for 2026. Nonetheless, for FFT, 26,436 patients responded. Overwhelmingly, a positive response. I know it's a bit of a crude indicator for patients, but that's what the public have told us, that on the whole, our services are rated good or very good. So I think it's important to put that balance in there for all aspects of patient experience. Ailey talked earlier about the patient panel and how do we engage more with the public. So part of our ambition for 2026 is to set up in April, 1st of April I believe, a patient experience forum. So a bit like Martha's role, members of the public who contact panels will be able to contact straight through to senior nurse on the phone. It could be me or my deputy, and we will try and resolve the issue in real time with a structured, organised approach to this. I think it will be hopefully very successful. I think the waiting time for responses for non-urgent concerns to PALS is far too long. You'll see in the packets over 40 days. That is extremely excessive, and we know that the bulk of these concerns, if they're resolved in real time, won't convert to complaints. I think overwhelmingly there's a great ambition for us to work really hard on linking together national patient surveys and what our patients attend at a local level. So I think this report is a bit of a mixed bag with some really quite interesting numbers, some detail around the high categories of trends and themes, but also the areas that we're focusing on, which are the emergency department, gynae, trauma and orthopaedics, and indeed paediatrics as well. So stop and take questions.
Thank you, Teresa. I'll open that up. Just one question I did have before I hand over to Richard. You mentioned this, that seems to be quite a significant increase in the number of, well, actually both compliments and complaints.
Yes.
Do we know whether that is a national trend and that other peers are seeing the same trend?
So what we do know is there is a national uptick in PALS and complaints concerns. What we are seeing is that where services offer a 7-day patient contact service, that's starting to plateau or come down. So that's part of our ambitions. How do we field a 7-day access service that patients, members of the public, can get straight through to a senior nurse and hopefully get their issues resolved?
Thank you. That's Richard.
Thank you. So you partially asked my question. I think, so first of all, there's a lot of positive action in the report, which I really appreciate, especially around dementia. But the complaints were a concern to me. It is clearly to you as well. And I have not really heard what is driving the 18%.
So I would say that what we're seeing from that 18% uptick, it's really around patients and mental frustration, perhaps waiting too long in ED, and expecting that they're going to have an appointment to see a specialist, and that perhaps not coming in a timely fashion. And I think overwhelmingly, Richard, you could put it into one category, which is communication. So that is, communication real time with the patient or the family member, whether it's in ED, whether they're at home, and that's across the top 5 specialties. But we can work differently around this. I think there's definitely something that we're learning through instances just now and triangulating network campaigns, is that if we can get in early, if you spot something either in the outpatients or in the ward, or you're a wee bit frustrated because you haven't had that letter about your follow-up, if you can get through to somebody on the phone, it should make a difference.
Any more questions? Tisha Barr.
Thank you, Chair. Teresa, my question is around the compliment, which is an actual amazing thing for us to receive, and obviously I appreciate that that's a sign of what we do. What forum do we give patients to give us those compliments? Because I'm assuming with the complaints that we obviously, if there's any issues, please reach out to us. Do we have a similar sort of space where we
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So we have a myriad of different ways that they come through. Sometimes they're into chief exec and say we've got great care across maternity and NICU, and I want to tell you about it, and Adam very helpfully gets that message down to each and every one of the teams in the department. But also as well, what we're seeing is, whilst we've seen a trend of patients wanting to tell us where things are not right, they're also telling us where things have gone well. So we're seeing people come into PALS, go into the complaints office and say, I need to tell you a little bit of positive experience. We're seeing much more, and it's an interesting sign from the public. We're seeing a lot more letters, cards coming in towards the departments, and also to myself, I just need to tell you I had really good care when I was on the stroke board. So I think the public in a way are responding in a way to what they've experienced personally, and it's how do we capture that, how do we grow it, and how do we get it transferred across great areas. And we have got some departments where they receive nothing but praise or compliments, and how do you get that department supporting one that's perhaps not as successful?
I think in terms of the channels, it's interesting because there is a formal national complaints process that everyone has to. There isn't the same push to say everyone must be offering that. We do have a number of channels, but just picking up on Teresa's point, I think there is an underlying thing. It's not evidence-based, but anecdotal. What you read in some of these, the common phrase that comes through when you hear so much negativity about the NHS, I want to tell you about. And I think as we're hearing more in the media about the challenges we do face, in the last week, so I'm not a local resident, I live in Essex, but people I know contacted me to say, how can I get in contact with my local trust? Because I've had a really brilliant experience, and yet they might have read in the papers or seen on the news about the long waits to A&E, and they say, I was in and out within an hour and got brilliant care. So I think we're seeing a bit of this increase in confidence where people are in the normal, they would just say, well, this is just great care, that's what I expect. Now I think because they're pushing back a bit about what they're hearing, that we're seeing a bit of a thing. That kind of variation on that sentence comes through a lot in the notes we're getting.
Apologies, Chair, I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Diana Skeet, I'm Executive Director for the Trust. Teresa, really useful and helpful report. I just wanted to pick up on, I think, a question I asked you in the previous board meetings, which was really around the capacity, team capacity. So I can see it here on the identifier, still on the kind of the risk register. Can you give any updates at all about how we're doing in that area?
Yes, absolutely. So over the past couple of years, we've tried different solutions done by putting nurses in there, trying to help sort of man the desks, particularly phones in the PAL's office. So it's quite light and lean, I would say, in terms of the number of people we've got. And what that does do is, of course, create a backlog of responses that we just touched on there. But I'm really pleased to say that our senior manager for patient experience has returned from 4 months salary of sick leave only this week. I think that's a really big difference. You can see in the report the difference it makes by having a full-time carers nurse. You can see the energy, the impact and the difference that makes. I think there is an unmet need for a senior nurse just to be dedicated to patient experience, and that's part of our ambition for our strategy going forward to 2026.
Thank you.
David.
Well, I just think something we should be concerned. Complaints are a sort of barometer. And historically, we've had concerns about complaints in the trust off and on over the years. And one of those concerns now is the number, and one of the concerns is the speed at which we reply. So, and if we don't reply really quickly, then you just build in another problem. So, I appreciate there's been real difficulties with one senior member of staff of some time. Glad to hear that she's back. But we can't really take our eyes off the ball.
I have an additional question, because as you say quite rightly, if you look at the categories of the complaints that we are receiving, at their heart it seems to be about communication, and we all understand how very difficult it is actually down at DATD, but actually in the services as well, that the pressures are immense. Is there anything we can do to encourage our teams to communicate in a slightly different way, or slightly different messages, or in a slightly different stage of the process? Because I sometimes think that if patients are kept aware of what's going on, sometimes delays are a bit more understandable and they are more tolerant of them. If they feel they're left in the dark and they don't know what's going on, that's when things seem to be frustrations. So I'm just wondering, are we planning to do anything differently to try and address this fundamental issue?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. There's no doubt it's something that we used to do an awful lot of many years ago, David, you'll remember as well, was customer care and customer care training. I know it sounds a bit sort of schmaltzy, but it's not meant to be at all, because actually at the heart of it is making sure that we're responding to your needs. So this is something we're looking at for all levels of staff, including medical staff. So where we've had a fantastic consultant experience, how do we role model that? How do we record that? How do we create short videos that can be shared across the junior teams? Because it is quite often in those most difficult interactions, if you can make a breakthrough, then you will absolutely have the patient at heart of everything you do. So much more to do on training, feedback, and then real-time responsiveness.
That's good.
Yeah, just a couple of bits that I think bring something to life. So recognising that the data in here, and say it's suddenly changed, but this is 24-25. And a number of the areas that were coming on complaints would be this issue. I've been trying to get hold of someone in the booking team to cancel or check my appointment. And as we know, in the transition to a new version of the call centre where we saw some of the stats of how many calls weren't ever answered, reducing right down. I could not tell you the last time I've had anything in a complaint saying I couldn't get through. So I think we're likely to see areas like that improvements. And I think the other, I'm putting a lot of responsibility on Mark now. Another big part of what we are committed to in the new EPR is that we know a huge amount of time on the wards is spent having to do laborious processes. And a big thing that comes through in complaints is that I tried to ring through to the ward, someone said they'll get back to me, and I didn't. No one got back to me. And when we look at the response, it will often be around the fact, well, yeah, but that resident doctor you wanted to speak to had sick patients they needed to do, and they never got around to it. So I really think this drive about freeing up waste and work that we can redesign will give people more time to do that. And there is, and David's other point around the time to response. I think it's an area that we've had in peaks and troughs, and some of it is around the capacity of the central team. But a number of these complaints will rely on 4 or 5 different members of staff and coordinating, again, paper notes being passed around for people to do it. Just really taking our staff on the journey that they need to do that response, and therefore do it on day 1 rather than day 15, because it's going to have to be done. And just how do we look at that process of saying, let's not wait until we've got a moment, but do things early. But I do think some of those digital opportunities through the electronic notes, through the One EPR, will allow people a bit more breathing space. Alongside, and it's the latter process of this, we know because of both the national requirement and also our financial challenge of having reduced admin headcount, some of these admin posts would be people that are instrumental in that, and we've got to redesign our processes that mean with a smaller group of admin, or a smaller resource in admin, that we allow those people to still be able to maintain that patient interface.
Agreed. Mark?
Yeah, and to add to the digital theme is that we went live with our patient portal last year, and that's now fully integrated into the NHS app, and we've been rolling out the specialties through the year, which will finish in March this year. So we would expect to see better communication to the patient through either our own app or the NHS app as well.
Thank you. Janet?
Thank you, Janet Scotcher, non-executive. On that note, Teresa, you mentioned triangulation. Are we looking at the sort of buckets of areas that complaints come from and how that links to what Mark's just described? It would be interesting because we're making assumptions, and probably very rightly, around communication, but it would be interesting to see what impact that rollout is actually having.
Yes, we do triangulation, particularly divisional level as well, because quite often, say for example, we've had a complaint that's come in, and you might think, my goodness, was there an incident here? Did we have something? Have we missed something? Or did something else occur? We do triangulate. So that's done at the divisional level. It's also done at the senior level as well. And what you will see, although these are broad themes here and broad specialties, the subsets of which Janice will be absolutely clear about where we've had some real sort of peaks and troughs of activity. So I guess going back to Adam's point, we would see routinely issues about I'm not getting answered when I'm phoning up for my patient's appointment, I can't get through, and that really has just fallen off an absolute cliff now. So moving into 2020, the back end 2025-26, those specialties that we just touched on earlier are still the main ones, but what we're seeing is a different type of concern complaint, and it's much more about the interaction, the communication, the forward plan, and keep either the patient or the family abreast of the situation.
Stuart.
Thank you. The authors haven't put an assurance rating. My question is actually, is this a paper that would potentially benefit from assurance rating? And if the board thinks yes, a couple of points to consider. One is the 69% compliance for the timescale. Sorry. So 31% people not getting response on time. The flip side is out of over 900 complaints from actually the ombudsman section. It's actually quite remarkable that the biggest suggestion was actually an apology in the meeting with patients. That really suggests some good work. There will always be mistakes, but that shows some good handling.
Yeah, thank you. What do we think about? Should we give this paper an assurance level? Teresa, what's your view?
I think it's, it is important to have some insurance rating. I know David wants to come in as well, because it's confidence with the public, and I'm sure what the board wants to see here is a much more solution-focused 2026 action plan around patient experience. And I agree with Stuart, we have a very good relationship with the PHSO office. We're very respectful, we do work in tandem with the best interests of patients.
Okay, so let's assume we're going to go with an assurance level. So, as the responsible officer, what would be your recommendation for insurance level?
Gosh, that's putting me in the spot.
I'm sorry about that. That's Stuart.
I was going to compare to the chair of QAC. I would say reasonable at this stage.
You would say reasonable. David?
We see a quarterly report, and I'm not sure whether we've seen the annual report.
No.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's part of the explanation. Yeah. What do you recommend?
I think reasonable at this stage.
Yeah, I think it is useful.
Reasonable, Adam?
Yeah, my sense is reasonable, the logic behind it. I think this provides an awful lot of information, which gives assurance that there is a lot of work in place and processes, but it also highlights some of the gaps we still need to do more on. So it shouldn't be substantial, but I think reasonable would be where I would be.
Kevin?
I can understand the thinking behind it, but bearing in mind that two-thirds of this is around volunteers, we already have assurances around PALS and the number of inquiries and evidence elsewhere. Is it appropriate to have an assurance level against volunteers? I don't know, Teresa. Maybe
I think my inference would be around the competence indicator and the feedback from the public, whether that's the volume of complaint responses or indeed PHSO side of things, which is more statutory. Other views?
Yeah, this is an annual report. I'm not sure it needs an insurance level. We do the quarterlies in the QHC. We follow it there. We give assurance levels there. This is just, let's say, to report back what we've done. I'm not sure it needs an insurance level.
Okay. However, Jill for an Ed, I didn't say that earlier. Sorry about that. What this does give us, which we haven't had at the committee, I think, Richard, is some clarity on the yearly achievement of objectives and priorities that have been in the year and the priorities going forward. So that element gives us assurance that that is being that is clear and that's being given executive priority. And my reflection is I don't think we have necessarily asked those questions at the committee. So, okay. Any other views? So we have one dissenting voice, but most people are saying yes, we probably can do an assurance level, and we are doing an assurance level of reasonable. I don't know, Adam, did you want to comment on this one? Why are we asking you? I do apologise.
It was clearly so compelling.
It was so compelling. I forgot my apology. Yes, you did. And you said you were happy with reasonable.
I understand this, but I guess as a non-member of QSE as well, do I feel assured that this is adding to my level of assurance? And it would say yes. So we can almost argue about semantics, but I think it does provide me genuinely with some assurance.
Okay. I think the majority view is that we will go with an assurance level, that we will go with reasonable. I think for me personally, what I'm looking forward to seeing going forward is exactly as you said, Teresa.
we need to move from monitoring the situation to being able to talk about what we've achieved to improve the situation. So I think maybe if we make this an assurance paper, that actually might drive that a little bit. And I think that is a good reason to put an assurance level on, in my view. So if everyone is happy, we will go with an assurance level of reasonable on this paper. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, David, quickly.
We could discuss this later, but my recommendation had been that QSE does see this, and we have 3 quarterly reports, and I'm happy to do what you want. I think the fact it came here was entirely due to sickness.
At one level, most of the information here should form part of our annual quality account as well, which was, so there was something about we need to take away just being clear what the purpose of each of the documents is.
Okay. All right, thank you. And certainly I think it would make sense for QSE to see that. Okay, lovely. Moving on then, it's a bit of a Teresa show now. We're going to go on to safeguarding annual report. Is that all right?
Chair.
Thank you.
Delighted to present this report. That's how I've been. Very technically specific, and we have the most exceptional safeguarding team, as might be been a safeguarding for many years. I'm sure Justin would agree with me on that. Nonetheless, I'll take the report as read, but what you'll see in the report, and I'm sure you've all want to ask questions on it, is a real sort of incremental increase in activity across children's safeguarding and indeed adult safeguarding, and some really high level complexity of cases as well, whether that's think family or vulnerable adults across that whole domain. I think one of the areas that I've just drawn out, of course, is around our domestic violence numbers. So I suppose this is an area that we are watching with interest and supporting not just women in maternity and early stages of pregnancy, late stages of pregnancy, but across every single aspect of our clinical service, including our staff. In fact, Lucy and I were chatting about something earlier that happened recently. We are very lucky in that we have Deborah Strawn, who's our head of domestic finance, who reviews all of our cases, has an ex-police background, and is very comfortable with our women and our men. I must just say it's not just women who suffer domestic violence, making sure that they feel in a position to be able to raise concerns and they are supported all the way through that. The report itself does align to our statutory and legal obligations in safeguarding, which we are fully compliant with. And I would just also like to thank Hampshire Local Authority for their support in all of the safeguarding initiatives that we have pursued across the past 12 months. And you'll see many of our successes in child sexual exploitation, etc., where we have transported our learning not just across the region but also nationally for best practice styles. So I will stop now, Chair, and take questions.
Thank you, Teresa. This is an assurance paper which has been given an assurance rating substantial, and I open for questions. Jill.
I'd like to commend Teresa very clearly, if I may, for such a clear, professional, comprehensive report. It's not easy in such a complex area of practice, actually, and she has achieved that superbly, so I thank her for that. I would also like to say that in the last year I've come across, mainly through clinical visits, numerous examples of how safeguarding has been held at a high focus and is being discharged in the way described within this report. My question though is about, because in terms of expertise, you refer up to level 3 safeguarding as such, and I just wondered if we had local standards or whether we rely on external expertise to a level 4 or level 5, which is so important in terms of systemic impact and organisational strategic priorities regarding this area of practice. So what are our local standards for level 4 and 5, and do we meet those?
Before you answer that, Teresa, and I would count myself here, I don't know the detail, the difference between 3, 4 and 5. So if you could just give us a quick brief summary, that'd be really helpful.
Absolutely. So if you think about, and just I'm sure you'll have a view on this as well, so if you think about the levels of everybody should have level 1, level 2 you're probably working in the clinical area, level 3 is slightly more sophisticated, so these would be more senior clinical staff, seeing a hybrid of perhaps complex cases, so they need a level of expert knowledge. When you get to 4 and 5, you're looking at very specific roles, so like my role or Justin's role, or the CDOC doctor who will oversee the child protection services in relation to children's deaths. So these are very specific, very specialised training requirements, and they are multidisciplinary, and they are also mandated in part by the college as well. So there are certain aspects of this that are highly specific. And to give you a niche example, perhaps, if we had, we don't actually have an expert in our trust, but we do in the region, who is a specialist in FGM, as an example, they would probably be trained to level 5 because they would do very specific, highly technical reviews of those types of clinical cases. I would just say on the training, if I may, you'll see in our stats here that we're still pushing hard to get our numbers up in level 3.
Yeah.
And we had some great success last year, particularly with our anaesthetists, our orthopedic surgeons, etc. Really sort of leaning into the safeguarding and training at that level, and we need to revisit that again through rolling half days. The thing with safeguarding is you can really ignite a flame in somebody's consciousness when they see something difficult. I know that sounds dreadful, because then you have the tools to cope with it. And in a way, it's explaining those really complex and difficult stories that ignites a flame around the training. So we've got work to do with training, but I have to say, Justin's a phenomenal support in terms of championing safeguarding with him at that level. And I'm sure, Justin, you're level 5 or level 10, if there's one probably there.
There isn't. I was going to make a few comments. I also think it's a really good report, and I think we have an extremely professional team, and I'm very grateful to them for the work that I do. As you know, I work within children's ED, so I see this from both sides, both the assurance side, but actually the process side. And we have a really good system in children's ED of how we complete an initial concern when a child is seen. I really wanted to draw the board's attention to one specific area within the report, and that's just the sheer number of child protection medical examinations that we're doing as a trust each year. I think we did 178 in the year that's described. Those are really detailed, time-consuming, really important examinations, and it's very important that we give clinicians the right amount of time to get those right. They determine whether a child will continue to live with their birth family. They may well be called upon in court subsequently. So it's really important that this is an area of work that we do well, and I'm really grateful that we've got such a professional team who are doing this work. I love that.
Chair, finally, I just apologies before I jump in. We do commission level 4 and level 5, but we do that through the systems and do it.
Okay, so we don't have anybody internally.
We do have them trained, but not train us, so I'm trained to them.
Okay,
so
great. Jan,
thank you. Thanks for this report. I agree, I think it's really comprehensive and it is a complex area. Back end of last year, I went to visit and spend some time with the children's safeguarding team. And having a background in children's services myself, I'm really impressed with what they were doing. I thought also their multi-agency links were great. I thought the way that they were supervising out into other areas, like ED, for example, was really impressive as well. It felt like somewhere where people were able to really think very carefully and thoughtfully about the cases that they were dealing with. An environment where often with quite challenging circumstances, they'd be able to diffuse effectively, so that was really impressive. But I too was quite taken aback by the kind of increased volume and didn't think, gosh, that's a lot. I know there are some concerns there around capacity. And the other thing that just troubled me a tiny bit was they're very enthusiastic and very keen on the benefit that digitisation is going to have, and just worrying about making sure we get that right in terms of flagging and sharing information.
Thank you. Lucy.
Hello, I'm Lucy Davies, Chief Operating Officer. Just to really add and underline from an operational perspective, the degree to which this effort is multidisciplinary, to security guards, to the play team, as well as the directly trained clinical staff and indeed operational managers, just in the kind of work I come across routinely, either in on-call shifts or just in the course of my day, is really impressive and certainly better than I've seen at the trusts I've worked in.
And very strong links also with social care.
Yeah.
Which often can also be tricky. Very good. Tisha Farah.
Thank you. Teresa, my question relates to our training compliance recovery, especially for the government training, which is currently lower. I think even less than half of what is supposed to be national, and this is lower than it used to arrive at. Do we have a recovery plan to get us to that mark, and is there any sort of enforcement that will be used? Feel like this is
It's a really good question, and it's one that the Safeguarding Board, which is very well attended externally and internally, reviews every 4 weeks. But I know that, Justin, you've got some good plans around how to get our medical workforce particularly engaged, involved and understanding, because it is that 2 o'clock in the morning concern that you need to be able to draw on your training and your education to make the right call. I don't know, Justin, do you want to sort of give your position?
I'm just going to make some specific comments about the Oliver McGowan training. There are some issues with the training. Level 2 of the training is a whole day of training, so it means taking every single clinical member of the organisation out for a day. It's complex to put on because it is led by people who have learning disability, and that's really important. That limits the number of people who can go through each session of the training. So logistically, in a hospital of this size, in all hospitals, this is difficult. And I know that hospitals throughout the country are struggling to be able to allow enough of their staff to attend this training. There are a couple of issues with the training, and I'm very happy to speak about those openly. The training talks a lot about recognition of learning disability and talks a lot about what it's like to be somebody with a learning disability, and that's desperately important. But actually what the training doesn't do, and I think one of the things that I'm really worried about as a medical director, is it doesn't talk about the physical health problems that people with learning disability may have. And you'll see from the PSIIs that we've been involved with, that is something that we're worried about as an organisation. So I think we've got a number of problems. I think this is really difficult training to get everybody through and to release people from work, but I'm not 100% convinced that this training is doing all that we need it to do. So we're thinking very hard as a senior leadership group about how we deal with that, because this is nationally mandated, but I'm not convinced it's where it should be.
I've got several people, if I could just comment on the training bit, because I have done level 2 at another organisation, but they actually had quite a night. It was done online, and most of the contributions were from those people with lived experience were actually recorded. So there were 2 facilitators, one who had learning disabilities and one who didn't. They were live, it was on Teams, but everyone else was recorded. And so actually it was a little bit easier to put on. I would, however, agree with your comment about the content. It's very much about understanding the perspective of people with learning disabilities rather than helping clinical staff recognise issues. So but I do think it really did, certainly for me, at the time, it was a few years ago, it did actually make me really pause and consider how we give my mind's gone blank, but actually give people with learning disabilities control over their treatment. So I thought that was really helpful. But I think there are sort of hybrid ways that might make it a little bit more palatable, but totally recognise we need to do the extra bit. Right, so I have got Richard, I have got Teresa, and I've got Kevin still waiting. Richard.
Yeah, I mean, just it triggered me a little bit with the 178, which was a significant increase compared to last year. And I'm wondering what's driving the increase, and is this a general trend that we see across, or are we an exception?
So, do you want to so I think it's a national trend. Many of the examinations for child abuse that we do are children who are referred to us as an organisation by social care. Right. So something would have been noted in the school, something would have been noted in a GP visit, and that child will then be referred to us. So much of this is work that we do for other statutory organisations. A smaller proportion of it will be work that we do because we have recognised an abnormality and we want to do a detailed examination. So I think it's part of a national trend. It is always difficult work, and it's always really important that we get this right.
I would agree with Jocelyn entirely, Richard. I would say that these numbers that we're looking at now are much more akin to an inner setting, or where you can see in a slightly more perceived deprived community. There's definitely something in the system that's changing. We've seen that in areas. If you were in some of our wards and departments, many of the execs on just now, some of the complexities that we're holding in paediatrics just now and have been for some time, there is definitely something changing in our environment that's warranting these examinations. And I wonder, Chair, if I could just quickly spend 1 minute on learning disabilities. Justin is absolutely right, we cannot ignore the physical component of any individual patient or carer who has learning disabilities. We must be cognizant, as we are as an organisation, about identifying difference in the various national reports that have led us to how do we make sure that patients and people, public who have any form of learning disability are supported to live an active and healthy life, and that they have equity of access to treatment. I don't think we should focus too much on the length of the time it takes to be trained with our content. And it's combining the best of all we get, because there's some great stuff in there, and pulling that together with some physical health requirements that will be collected. And some 2 final points. You've seen the impact, and thank you to the charity for this, of our learning disabilities nurse in paediatrics, who is just phenomenal. She's a background in school nursing, children's nursing. She's transforming children's care for LD. We probably need the same in adult services as well, and we work towards that. But when you triangulate the training and the expertise at ground level, you see that transformative difference, and we'll discuss this more.
Thank you. Kevin? It's been answered. Right, okay. Right, can I just ask, because somebody outside will be able to know whether our patient has arrived yet, because I understood that the patient should have been here around this time. My plan is that as and when the patient arrives, we will break for a coffee break, which we were going to be having about this time. Right, so what I suggest we do is, can we please pause now for a coffee break? But what we will be doing is, we will also
Welcome back to this meeting of the Trust Board in public. We're now turning to our next agenda item, which is about the Board Assurance Framework, and I'll hand over to Stuart Dalton.
Thank you. So Stuart Dalton, Head of Corporate Governance. So before turning to the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Finance Officer for the two spotlighted risks, just two alerts which the cover sheet covers, which is the Mount Vernon consultation. We just heard a patient who wanted to remain anonymous talking very powerfully about the impact that this particular risk has and distance of travel. The second point is around the recommendation from FPPC to increase the system instability risk from a score of 16 to 20. And then the last point to note is reasonable assurance following the debate at the Royal Board, and that's the recommendation board. So if I then move on to spotlighting risks, so if I could turn to Justin first for the health and inequalities risk.
Thank you, Stuart. So there's quite a lot of work going on around health inequalities. We've set up a health equity group within the Trust, and there's some detail around that in the BAF. The health equity group in turn is taking forward 5 separate programmes of work looking at different areas that we feel that we can have an impact on as a team. I would say that this is still early days for us as an organisation, but actually there's a real enthusiasm of people coming together to really try and do some different stuff. I'm very happy to take questions about the ratings within the BAF.
Let me just pause there. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that BAF risk? No? Okay, thank you very much. We'll take the paper in red. Second one.
Hi there. I'm Armstrong, I'm the Trust's Chief Finance Officer. So I think the board will be well aware that financial delivery has been a key challenge for us kind of this year. As we kind of sit here today, we are still fairly confident, pretty confident that we will hit our break-even plan. But we know during the course of the year that the means that we will achieve that by will be through a series of kind of non-recurring kind of actions rather than the original plan that we kind of set out. So as we kind of at kind of Q3 kind of point here, we thought it was important to kind of refresh the BAF kind of risk on there to really kind of concentrate on some of the gaps and controls and assurance that we've seen across the year, and they will be kind of familiar to board and kind of committee members on them and kind of set out in some detail, an emphasis particularly around some of the challenges of kind of CIP delivery this year. Again, some of the progress that we've been able to make in terms of kind of productivity, what that means for our activity kind of delivery in there. They're all kind of set out in a refreshed kind of section of the BAF on there, and then the actions and mitigations that we're trying to take in order to address them, because I think the key issue is that many of these issues will not just magically end at the end of kind of this financial year, but are things that will roll over into next year. And as part of our work around kind of planning, we know that we need a concrete and coherent kind of means of kind of addressing these challenges going into next year. So we've refreshed that section of the BAF to really reflect those issues. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments for Martin on that particular aspect? No? Are we comfortable overall with the paper, as Stuart has already highlighted, has a reasonable assurance level, and as we discussed at length last time, that relates more to the processes that we are using to govern the BAF process rather than the risks themselves. A nuance but an important distinction. Are we comfortable with reasonable as our or do we want to make any changes to our assurance level? Comfortable? Okay. Slightly fewer nods than normal, but we are still getting nods. Okay, right. On that basis, I will take that as agreement for the board that we continue with that assurance level. Stuart, thank you very much for the update. Moving then to the integrated performance report, and Justin.
Thank you. So I'm going to take you through all 4 quadrants of the IPR this month. And I'm very grateful to my colleagues for their help in putting this together. And certainly if the questions are difficult, I'm going to ask for help from them to answer them. So we'll start with quality as we always do. So the things I'd like to draw to everybody's attention are that we continue to have high incident reporting, but those incidents on the whole have a low rate of harm, and that's where I want us to be as an organisation. We've got sustained reporting of good care events, and we've spoken about this already this morning in the context of positive information coming to the panel service, but we can learn from those good care events, and it's really important that we do that. We're making progress slowly but surely with venous thromboembolism. It's a difficult area, and we've spoken about it in quite a lot of detail at QSC and also at board. It's moving forward slowly. You'll see from the quality section that we've got a new PSII looking at our follow-up processes, and we'll be bringing that to board in the future to further scrutiny. Stroke is currently a D on the SNAP rating. That's a little bit of improvement over the last couple of months from me, but we've still got further to go. You'll see that there is clear progress on the time to getting onto the stroke unit, but there are other elements of stroke care that we need to work on, and we are working on those. And major obstetric hemorrhage remains something that we have under review. We know that this is a problem across many trusts in the UK at the moment. We're seeing an increased rate of MOH, but it's something that we need to watch carefully because it has a profound impact on the women concerned. So I'm going to move on to operations, and I want to preface this section by just saying a massive thank you to all of the teams that are working so hard in the hospital at the moment. The periods I'm reporting on November and Cancer October, actually it's been a really difficult time over the last few weeks since Christmas, and that people are working extraordinarily hard to keep patients safe. So for the month of November, our 4-hour performance and our ambulance handover are exactly on trajectory where we want them to be. We always predicted they would be less good in January, and they are more problematic, and we're seeing that across the whole of the east of England, indeed across the whole of the UK, and all of Redfern and the Grass. Our cancer weights, I'm pleased to say we achieved 3 out of 3 of the targets in October. Our RTT, so this is the catching up of patients who need appointments or procedures, is on target. We're achieving what we're expected to achieve as an organisation. And we're continuing to work on our audiology and neurodiversity, which are more problematic areas for us. You'll also see in the papers that we were affected by a pause on 2 of our 3 MRI machines past an issue that had been identified internationally was fixed. That has now been fixed, and we're back up to full capacity with MRI. We're going to go to finance next. So year to date, the deficit is exactly where we expected it to be, and it's in line with our phasing. The SIP achievement, so this is our cost improvement achievement at month 8, is significantly lower than we needed it to be, and we've relied on non-recurrent funding, and Martin was alluding to that when he was talking about the BAF. This has got implications for our finances next year, and if we don't get our run rate right, it will lead us into problems. Income is a little bit higher than we expected in this month, but so are our costs, both our pay and our non-pay costs. And finally, our elective activity is slightly higher, and our income is also a little bit higher as well, but that's a cost. Moving on to people, you'll see that there is a slight increase in turnover, but it's fairly marginal. We've also had a small drop in our statutory and mandatory training levels, and we're doing a review of that as a result of that. We're particularly looking in nursing, and we've already made mention this morning about the 10-point plan, and as part of that we will be bringing people's training with them when they move into the organisation. Flu vaccine uptake, we were charged with improving on last year's figures, and we have done that. Currently 45% of our staff have received the flu vaccination. Vacancy rate is under target at 5.8%, and our agency usage remains below target, but bank is slightly above in month, and we're working to manage this. And the board will be aware that we've put in place a resource control to help with that. And I'm going to stop at that point. Welcome questions.
Thank you, Justin. I will come to the committees if they have anything they specifically want to add. Before we go into that, any questions or comments? Jill?
Two questions, if I may, for Lucy. First, in the paper it identifies that the PTL has grown by 800 since the last report. I wondered if that trend was anticipated to continue. And I suppose the context of me asking that question is regard to recent discussions around the quarter of referrals.
So it's multifactorial, and some of it relates to shorter term staffing difficulties in our validation team, so some sickness that meant that we are not able to validate as many patients as we normally would, and also some deliberate redirection of where we focus that team so that they are helping to address the issue that you're referring to, and make sure that appropriate validation for patients that are on non-RTT PTLs takes place in a timely way as well. The growth that you're referring to is in the referral to treatment part of the PTL rather than the non-referral to treatment PTL, and the ex-ward discussions we've been having relate to them.
Yeah, no, so sorry. I was helpfully trying to put the context of why I'm asking about it, but perhaps that wasn't so helpful. So is the trend for the increased PTL anticipated to continue?
It's anticipated to continue, but not at the rates that we've seen in the last couple of months.
Thank you. Now it's my second question. My second question, I'm glad I had this question because my interpretation from the content around MRI capacity was that we had increased that from that which we historically had. But I think what I understood from yourself was we're back to where we were. So my question is even more relevant really with that question mark. And my question is with regard to whatever the capacity is that we have for our MRI at the moment, whether it is increased or back to where it was, does that mean that we have mitigated the risks that were previously considered with regard to radiology requirements for safeguarding children?
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to in terms of safeguarding children.
Yeah, I can probably. They're two slightly different issues. So one of the risk around safeguarding children was the risk of needing specialist radiology input for screening surveys.
Yes.
And that's not MRI, that's plain radiography.
Which is why I was asking the question, whether that mitigated it at all. No, it doesn't mitigate it at all.
So we've come up with a solution to that problem. So we're working with other trusts, we're working with outsourcing, because those X-rays need rapid reporting, but they also need double reporting. And currently the trust only has one paediatric radiologist. So in order to get that double reporting, we have to work with other organisations. The MRI availability problem.
Do you want me to go a bit more the recall?
Yeah.
During December, in fact, Siemens, the company that provides have manufactured our MRIs, there was an international recall by them that affected 2 out of our total 3 MRI machines while they fixed the particular issue. And we think it affected about 20%, 18-20% of MRIs nationally. So we were unlucky. We did quite a lot of deep dive into that. It was an incident at the time that was unanticipated. We had to cease putting patients on the MRI the very same day they contacted us about it. And it's not anything to do with the way we maintain the machine. It's, I mean, if it were a car, it's a kind of, a bit like the exhaust. If it was, if there was manufacturing fault in that part, or just bad luck that there'd been a particular build-up of an element that needed to be removed. Each of the MRIs took the work that Siemens needed to come and do on them took a week to 10 days on each of those machines, and that was partly affected by the very specialist engineering that Siemens needed to provide for us. So it was it was a difficult incident to deal with, but they were both back up and running for Christmas.
So we are just back to the capacity that we have always had. We're not above that.
We're not above that, but part of our capacity for MRI is supported by outsourcing to Pine Hill and the substitution also in terms of the van that we have. Because we've made good progress on CT, we've substituted some of the days of the in-sourced vans that we have between CT and MRI. So, our total MRI capacity is made up of the fixed machines, the machines that we buy in on a regular basis for a couple of days a week, and outsourcing. So, I mean, there's a lot of agile work to keep reviewing demand versus capacity, not just once a year, but within the context either of unanticipated incidents and also progress within different specialties and need that arises.
So we had flexed up outsourced an extra capacity this year in order to improve the diagnostic position, and that is still in place.
Thank you. I know I haven't got to Janet.
I've got a couple of questions related to the interplay between the finance and the people aspects. So the key one was it talks about the overall bank and agency spend being below target for the first time in the people section, but then also talks about Trust continues to increase its cohort of permanent staffing, not reducing premium utilisation at proportionate rates. So I guess my question is, have we got that target right within the people aspect of it, if it's not delivering financially what we're expecting to see? That was one question. The other two questions were maternity bank spend. This has been a kind of an ongoing issue. We know midwives get pregnant because of the cohort of women. Often there's a high percentage of women of childbearing age within the midwifery cohort. Does it make sense to run things in that way, or would it not be better to have one supernumerary midwife to cover? If we actually did the maths, would that work and also cost effective? And then the final question was around the care support workers and the high care support worker spend. Is that, what's behind that? Is it to do with things like potentially specialist mental health patients? Is it related to perhaps it's easier to get that signed off for bank and agency than it is for, so it's more to the specialist? Is it?
Yeah.
Who wants to take? So the first one was about if the bank and agency are going down, why are we not getting the cost savings?
Well, it's related to the fact that the people, as panel is saying, we're performing better than target, but yet financially we're not having the impact.
Exactly.
So is the target wrong?
Well, that can make a start. Maybe Penny and Teresa might come in bits of it as well. So you're probably aware, Janet, that we have kind of struggled this year. I think we're definitely making good progress in terms of recruiting more permanent staff into our establishment. But I think inevitably the challenge that we've had as an organisation is tapering down temporary staffing resource in proportion kind of to that, and temporary staffing resource has reduced, but not as much as our permanent staffing has kind of grown. So part of our kind of challenge in terms of trying to address that and keep that into alignment has been the development of a resource kind of control panel on the CXX meeting 3 times a week, really put some extra challenge and some extra review, particularly into that temporary staffing kind of space, to make sure that, as I say, those two things are moving in alignment with each other. And Penny might want to talk a little bit about how that's going. I think in terms of the CSW piece, we recognise that we did have a very large vacancy factor in terms of CSWs that we wanted to make progress into, and I think there has been a really good recruitment process into that. We recognised as part of that there would be, however, a little hump in there as new individuals landed, and lots of them have. There would be a supernumerary double running kind of period in there, and that was during kind of November in there. I can definitely see in terms of December that we've moved kind of past that place now. But so hopefully that's helpful. I'm sure Penny and Teresa might want to add little bits to that.
Can I just jump in on the, so we had some hotspots around vacancies as well, so definitely theatres, ED were 2 areas. ED's just about resolved it. I think we're still at the back of the tail of staff being inducted and being fully functional, which I think absolutely right. Theatres still a work in progress. We've got people coming online, again, getting training and make sure that all lands in. At CSWs, we had a big gap actually. Martin is absolutely right. We were closing down over about just under 40 vacancies across the whole trust. To the credit of the organisation, we've never refused a special, we've never turned down a post that's needed for a clinical area or anything like that. But we did have some quite a bit of international recruitment for CSWs, that's all stalled now, so we are recruiting individuals that are in the UK. That's had a wee bit of a lag time, but we're almost there. So I think by the end of January into February that should come very soon.
Should I just give a quick overview of the resource panel, because actually it was designed to replace the vacancy panel, and it looks at permanent recruitment but also banking agency. And I think that the inclusion of so many of the execs is hugely time intense. It's 3 times a week, but actually it's shone a light on some really interesting things for us and caused us to kind of ask ourselves a few questions, which I think Janet touches on. Have we got things right potentially in some of our areas? So where we're getting either high requests for bank, the question's been asked, well, is your resourcing plan correct? So we've done a deep dive that's coming to the panel on Friday, one of our departments where we have very high requests for bank, and it's like, well, why can't we cover this with, short-term absence, it's seasonal, you kind of expect it, but this is particularly high. And what it's done is shone a light on that as to have we got this correct, and have we got rostering or budgets aligned to resourcing. Maternity is one, and we've got other departments. So I think it's been really helpful because it's allowed us to ask those probing questions. Why are you recruiting? Can you do things differently? And that's, I think, where we've been adding a lot of value to that is, do you really need an additional post? Can you use the production system to be more efficient? And really questioning our kind of operating model and design, rather than just, you've got a vacancy, we'll fill it. So I think it will take some time to work through in terms of certainly cashable benefit, but what it has done short term is allowed us to understand the issues in far greater detail, and the next step is support and so on.
And will the new panel consider questions like the middle one that Janet asked, which is to say, if we know there is a population where there is likely to be maternity leave, is it more cost effective to put resource in early, or do we wait and do bank agency time? Is that kind of thing outside the scope of this panel, or is it the kind of thing that we are looking at?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. I think what we're looking at is where we get kind of pockets of demand like that. It's what's the most cost-effective way of meeting that resourcing need. Another example is where we get bank when we have niche skills. Can we make, buy, outsource, or do we just need to get bank? But it's having that scrutiny. Is this the best way to provide that skill, that competency, capability into the organisation? That's the discussion, I think, that will really add benefit rather than just going through as a tick box and doing that. So absolutely that, because if you see, which we have in one particular area, continual problems, it's indicative of something that needs a bit of a deeper dive.
Yeah, I was just making a comment on that. I think that building on that, the key is, yes, you're right, there is a particular cohort just based on percentages that we are going to get maternity. I think we're seeing a particularly high level, and therefore there's that balance of where do you picture the norm over establishment. So I think Penny's demonstrated how we're focusing on getting better. My question, it may be a question or a comment, is it was triggered by the comment just in around the good care events, and it links to Tijifara's question earlier on about with externally, how easy do we make it to raise the positives rather than the concerns? Triggered by an email I had from a consultant yesterday, so they wanted to raise a good care event about the team they observed, but it found it quite clunky. So I'm going to pick that up directly, but I think there is a bit, maybe, we're really wanting people to reinforce, because as has been said earlier, you learn from the good stuff, not just addressing the poor. We need to make sure we do make those channels easy and smooth so that people can raise and highlight good practice that others can follow.
Any general comments before I turn to the chairs? No. Right, so in which case, let me turn to David, as Chair of Quality and Safety. Were there any particular aspects of the IPR that you wanted to draw on?
The IPR, no.
Not the IPR, okay, yes, I'm not talking about your general committee report. Okay, Richard, finance and performance. Anything you particularly you'll do it in your report, okay? Janet?
No, I asked the questions I asked because we haven't got a report this month because of the realignment of the
Okay, brilliant. Okay, So, are we comfortable with the IPR is on? It's an assurance report. We have it as reasonable on the integrated performance report. Are we comfortable with that? Reasonable?
Well, it's an aggregation of lots of different things, right? And there are some elements where I would say I'm not comfortable at all. But yeah, I mean, how do you aggregate this, right?
What do other opinion? What do you think?
I just think it's really difficult. It's almost like doing an assurance of the whole meeting. And maybe this is an area where the question is there value in this issues for these?
Yeah. I'll echo that I'm not sure an assurance rating really tells me much.
No, I was surprised to see it. But have we always had an assurance rating on the IPR? I'm not sure we it disappeared. Yeah, and we don't even have a cover sheet or anything, so there's nothing to say. I think, and let's assume that there is no assurance rating on this, because I completely agree. It's too complex. It's too multifaceted to come up with one rating. So I agree with the client. Great. In which case,
can I make a suggestion though? Because we do have assurance rating on the individual elements of the performance report. Does it make sense to include these going forward? Because I think in a way it's important for the board to recognise what is the assurance level of the different elements.
That's a nice idea. What do people think? So we would then have what, one for each quadrant, effectively.
At least one for each quadrant.
So I guess in the report we have the variance columns, and we have the assurance, which is assurance about or confidence about hitting the target. Maybe we take it away as an action, conversation to look at how do we do something meaningful, or if we can't describe something, there's no point.
Yeah, it makes sense.
No, I was just going to say, I think I find that tricky. I can see the logic of it, but for me, it's the interplay between the quadrants that I'm curious about, so I'm not sure that assuring if that's going to work. For me, it's more, does it present a true picture of what's really going on? Does it give us a helpful overview? Is it, but I agree, I'm not sure about whether it gives us
Well,
assurance.
let's ask the executive team to go away and reflect, and we'll consider later. Okay, so forget the assurance. Let's move on then to the committee reports. And I'll go back to David. David, Quality and Safety Committee, anything you'd like to bring to our attention specifically?
I'd just like to expand on a couple of things rather than specifically bring to attention. So the first is 7-day standards. I may be wrong, but my impression is that nationally that 7-day standards are sort of less of a priority, but there's still, some of them, 4 of them are still measured. Our compliance has dropped a bit, so the 14-hour consultant review rate is at 60%. And I suppose the importance of it is this is a building block to make other things work properly. So the committee has asked for a re-audit of 7-day standards at 6 months, so we know where we are, and suggested a re-establishment of the working group to oversee compliance and improvement. So I suppose the logic is if this works well, then it must be a positive thing for reducing inefficiency. And GIRFT, it remains a national priority. We've had 5 or 6 visits in the last 12 to 15 months, and I've certainly listened in and joined 2 or 3 of them, and I think there's no doubt there's a strong clinical buy-in, which is great. I suppose I struggle, maybe the committee struggled to understand how it fit in with our trust initiatives and whether this was just a standalone thing or whether it was something linked with other things. And certainly from an assurance point of view, we asked for our paper to be strengthened. So that's just really expanding on 2 things that I didn't really summarise well there.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments for David? No. Let's move on swiftly then to finance planning and performance. Richard.
Thank you. I just want to maybe emphasize a few of the points that have partially been made already. First of all, positively, I think cancer performance really good, consistently good, and was a small dip. I think we're one of the best in the country, which is just great to note. I think we've made significant improvemements on RTT, that is also clear. Diagnostics from an operational point of view is still the concern. We talked about MRI and audiology. I think financially, Justin has mentioned, we're still on track to deliver our goal for the year. This is true, but as Martin said, only because we use a lot of non-recurrent support here. And I want to just highlight a few things here. So we've got a SIP plan which is almost 36 million. And of the 36 million, only 22 has identified plans to execute. So a third of that plan, we never figured out how we would deliver in the first place. That needs to be a lesson, let's say, going forward. Secondly, there's two areas specifically that have got significant run rate issues, so they are behind their budget all year anyway, which is unplanned care and women's and children. So that's a fundamental issue we've not been able to sort out. And thirdly, we are really supported by the way that we are paid on activity this year through a block payment. If we look at the amount of activity, and if we would have been paid by activity, the problem would have been bigger. Why am I saying this? Because I think it still requires more action than we do currently. And secondly, when we think about the plan for next year, it has only increased the challenge for next year because we will end the year with a run rate which is significantly worse than we expected when we started the year. And that then causes the challenge for next year. So if we really want to achieve next year's numbers, and even this year is not a slam dunk. I'm just saying that there's a few months to go. We've got winter pressures, there's stuff ongoing, so we need to be focused on this year. When we think about the plans for next year, we fundamentally need to do things differently. So that's just what I wanted to emphasize. I think that's just fair to say in this board meeting.
Thank you, and I'm probably going to any comments on Richard's report?
Just fine, agree, really.
Thank you, Janet. Okay. Thank you, and I know we'll be talking about some of this stuff later as well. Oh yes, there's a bit of a gap. Okay, HCP performance report.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the first time we've brought this report through. Previously we have included for information the ICB performance report, but as we've always noted, it's been about 3 months behind, and so not provided any value. I'm not intending to go through the detail here for two reasons. One is this is very much developmental. I think a really positive step in this version is that we've now managed to include some local authority data in there, because it increasingly understanding the impact of provision of care, different care settings. It still is largely driven by organisational performance rather than for the local population, because recognising a lot of these North Harts patients on the borders might go to Princess Alexandra Hospital if they're in the east, or if they're in the south, go into the North London Trust, and it tends to be East and North Hart Trust performance areas, but it's getting better. So really it's just here for some information to hopefully demonstrate some of that improvement going through, and some of the greater awareness of some of the care that's not delivered by us but for our local population. The other reason for not doing too much on it is that although we have now established a committee of the board, we haven't actually been delegated with anything either from the ICB, or really we don't have actually any decision-making power. So it's a group that still works by consensus, and but we are doing the work in the background to be ready for that. But I think this report will take on more importance as genuine delegation for performance management commissioning halfway through.
Thank you. Janet.
So just one question. So it's got some useful local authority data in it, but doesn't have anything around children's social care?
That's because the adult social care team are the ones that links in with it. That has been made, and I think even the adult social care data at one level is quite narrow. So I think we're going to expand that more and more into children's services as well.
Thank you. David.
Well, can I just make an observation that the number of appointments in primary care, which is predominantly general practice, is static. We know demand has gone up. We know the number of appointments went up. We know, don't we, that quite a lot of primary care problems inevitably end up in secondary care. So we've got more work to be done here.
That's a good observation.
yeah, I mean, if I just make an observation, because I sit on that board, which is chaired by Adam, I think I am pleased to see the progress in this report. I mean, if you compare it to those ICB reports we used to get, which really were not very clean and meaningful volume, I think we are starting to get there. There is clearly some more work to be done, and that will become more mature as time goes on. But actually, I think it's a reasonable place to be for now. But we will want to see those missing bits, like the children's social care and so on. We will want to see those come into play. But it's progress. I think this is how I would see it.
If I just go back on that, one of the points I should have said is, so at the moment the discussion hasn't been about delegating children's services to HCP. It's quite possible if it doesn't go to the mental health learning disabilities, because that would be a challenge. So maybe that even doesn't end up in here because we won't be tasked with that. But yeah, your point is right. As we get more into some of the accountability, this we need to be assured through this stage we are where we need to be. The other thing linked in, because we didn't really pick it up in the back, it was mentioned that we have increased the risk about system instability because of all that's going on in the ICB at the moment. This data is produced from the ICB in a kind of place-based service, of which we'll be reducing by 50% and individuals' future. So I think this is probably an example of where progress is really relevant to that BAF rating, because I think we're going to struggle to make some of the strides that we want.
Do you want to go straight into the committee?
Yeah, certainly. Taking as read, I think the alert issues that I would raise is just a general principle. I think we're now seeing, with greater and greater join-up, services like hospital at home are at capacity. And we're finding more and more cases where people want to use hospital at home, and there's not the ability to do that. Had some really positive, very recent feedback from some of our clinicians talking about who worked in other systems about the number of pathways that are available, but equally we hear all those pathways we wish were available. So I think it's a good example of where we are. Probably over the last 2 or 3 years we've changed the narrative to can we get more of our clinicians involved using the service, through to can you just hold back a bit because we haven't got the capacity. And as an HCP, that left shift, well, we have to be careful not to just drift into jargon that the public won't necessarily understand, but that kind of moving care up the pathway and more prevention, I think this is some good examples both for the urgent care hub that tries to divert ambulances and community responses, and hospital at home, similarly preventing admissions but also allowing discharge, are increasingly at a capacity level where I think demonstrates some real success.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions or comments for Richard?
So building on that, what are we doing about it then? Because that is one of the things we need to drive, clearly.
Yes. Well, interestingly, in using the word drive, it comes back again to the accountability. So those services are not commissioned by us, are not provided by us, so we can do it as a collective working through. But I'm sure, without putting words into their mouth, but the community trust are probably, as part of the planning round, saying we need to increase capacity, there is a demand for it, and they will be pitching for more capacity in the same way that we would be looking for capacity to manage growth. What we're trying to do as an HCP, although not a mandate of the planning round, is to come up with a collective view of where, if there is growth money available, where would our priorities be? And I think these are areas where we can point to a genuine need that we would look to expand. The community trust will be very keen to do it, but in a resource-constrained environment, it's going to be where can we get that up the priority list, alongside some of the pressures we've discussed around ADHD assessments in children. But,
I mean, and just before colleagues will actually have a brought board with community trust next month, and I believe that this is on the agenda, some of this is on the agenda there. But I think, Adam's point is well made. I'm sure HCT would very much appreciate additional resource funding in order for them to expand that service. Equally, there are some things that we're doing we could desperately do with some resource funding too. And I think with the new ICB leadership and their stance on some of this stuff, which isn't yet totally clear, we're going to be sort of feeling our way into it to working out how we're going to do this. So I think the general point is well made. It's good to see it, but we want to try and encourage it in the right direction. What mechanisms we actually have is not,
influence.
And it's through influence and working collaboratively. And I think we also need to make sure, this is a kind of bigger point, I guess, that maybe a criticism hospitals always said there's 10% more people, we need 10% more beds or ED capacity. And there's a shift in the narrative to say, what could we do in community? But rather than just build bigger and bigger community, there is the work on prevention that means how many people should never get to hospital at home or uses it because primary care voluntary sector can do. So I think that journey, particularly to neighbourhood, hopefully can release some of this capacity that will free it up for the patients that we could move from our setting.
Okay, we've just got a couple more papers that I hope you can take as read, but we just need to just get to the last bit of it. Audit and Risk Committee, the chair of that committee, Karen's not here. Jill, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to highlight.
I did check with Karen, there was something specific she wanted to raise, just to bring people's attention. This primarily the contents pertain to a meeting in October, seems quite a while ago now. And an extraordinary meeting due to a delegation from the board to approve the charity accounts, which we've done.
Great, thank you very much. Move the Charity Trustee Committee, Nina.
So Sunshine Terrace is starting to move, I think, although I haven't caught up with Kevin today, but we have got a revised plan that everybody's happy with. So we're really hoping that actually that will come to fruition in the middle of this year, and we'll actually see some work going on with that. And we are in the background starting to think about what our next big charity project might be, and we're hoping to do something around children's wards. So that is one that we're really excited about. I think there's a lot of work that the charity and the staff as well and the trust can do around that. So that's a big piece of work that we're trying to do some planning on at the moment. And the only other thing I wanted to really point out was the amazing fundraising event that the team did, which was a Hertfordshire Residential Development Awards. And obviously there was a little bit of trust that went in from the board as well, allowing the charity to do something that was a little bit outside of what they would normally do. And this was the second year that they did it, and it was so much bigger, and they raised so much money, but it also really increased the profile of the charity. And you could see on social media that they were being tagged in lots of different posts, and so it's been a huge success. So I just want to say a massive thank you to the team as well for putting that together. And also they did the carols just before Christmas, which was also really successful, and I think on the back of that I'm expecting Anita and Adam to be putting together a choir for the next session. the next event. But yeah, I mean the team are just doing so much work at the weekends and the evenings and everything, so it's going really well.
I was going to say that you haven't, but I thought the carol concert at Hitchin was absolutely lovely. I think there were a couple of us there, but I really would encourage all the members if you can get along to it. It was really nice. I'd also want to praise the little Christmas fair that the charity put on the 22nd of December. When I went past a couple of times, there seemed to be good trade going through the day, and I think it was just a nice gesture. And it was visitors as well as staff, it was everyone. So yeah, again, so well done to the charity.
Yeah. Thanks, Anita. And they said that they went incredibly well, and actually there were loads of donations that were made by Tesco, and all of it kind of went. So
it was lovely.
They were really pleased.
Brilliant. Digital Committee. Again, and Stuart, I think, mentioned this earlier, we were planning both a report but also to have it in terms of reference, but we are actually going to hold that back, I believe, until the next meeting we want further review. But Richard,
yeah, so maybe let's start with the terms of reference. There is a new draft. We think it's the final draft, but we formally need to approve it in the committee, which is this Friday, so it was just a little bit of synchronization with the board meeting. And it is a result of transforming what was more of a task and finish group orientated on one EPR and outpatients to more of a formal board committee. I think from a content point of view, we're very pleased with the progress in outpatients. That's great. The digitization of patient records goes really well. Our biggest concern is around the implementation of one EPR. I think that was mentioned in the previous board meeting. At that point in time, we already decided to postpone it. At that point in time, we expected delivery of the software early December. We got some software delivered, but it's still not of the standard that it needs to be. We now expect that early February, and then based on that, there needs to be a replanning exercise where the committee has said we've got to make sure that we then know to implement it not later than October, and otherwise we get into the winter period again and we get into the same types of evaluations as we had this year. So we're still quite concerned. There's clearly this external dependency on Daedalus, the software provider. Contractually, we did an assessment. We feel we're in the right position here. We are protected, but from an operational point of view, which is far more important, the risk is still very prevalent.
Thank you, Richard. A really, really important project, and one that we're very grateful for oversight. Okay, I think that finishes our formal work for this morning. The annual cycle is obviously in the papers. I've not been notified of any other business. Our next meeting is on the 11th of March and will be held via Teams. And on that, I'm going to draw this meeting to a close.